Today, we welcome to the program Dr. John Kruse, who's a neuroscientist, psychiatrist, and also an author. John has been working with adults with ADHD for over 30 years. Now, John, you and I communicated a little bit offline, and you told me that you believe there is direct evidence that Donald Trump has used stimulant medications during a debate against Hillary Clinton, during State of the Union speeches, and a handful of other times. Now, before you talk to me more specifically about that, the context here, of course, is that Donald Trump is now regularly saying that Biden does the same and predicting that Biden will be on some kind of drugs at the debate coming this Thursday. You felt it necessary to say, hey, there's another side to this story about drug use. So let me turn it over to you and tell me what you believe and why you believe it.
So let's jump us back 8 years to the debate with Hillary Clinton. And at that time, Clinton had been leading Trump in the polls by 6 to 8% for almost all summer, all fall. They had had two debates, and the critics and I think the general population saw Trump wandering around the stage, wandering around in his speech, unfocused, unprepared. He had publicly said he wasn't going to do any preparation work, and people were saying, unless he gets his act together for the third debate, he's not even plausible as a candidate. Lo and behold, October 19th, the third debate comes, and whether or not you like the content of his speech, whether you agree with his thoughts, most observers said, he's sort of staying in one place. He's more or less answering some of the questions. His sentences, one flow from another. He looks more presidential. And if you look at the polling and I'm looking at the 538 collective polling numbers from October 19th, in the 3 weeks till the election, Trump's polling numbers go up 3%. Hillary's stay pretty much flat. There's a tiny dip, much less than 1% after the Comey verdict. So we can say that his performance in that debate may be well responsible for why he got elected. So as someone who is already aware that Trump has ADHD, and I can get into that whole discussion, I was thinking, what could be going on that could make someone who, what was actually going on in the presentation, and why did he look more presidential? So I began by looking at just physical gestures, and I measured any movement that was more than 10 centimeters. So it could be hand gestures, it could be body gestures, it could be moving around. And in the first two debates, he's making 42 of these gestures a minute, 42. That's, he's never still. The third debate, it drops down to 13 a minute. That's a dramatically, he's sitting there calmly. Now, someone with ADD, if they're really focusing on their behavior, if they're holding themselves, they might be able to control that. So that doesn't in itself prove anything, but stimulants are one of the things that we know that make someone with ADHD less hyperactive. So then I looked, and this is a somewhat squishier measure on what I called coherence of his speech. And that's just, does one sentence have any logical connection to the sentence before it? Again, not whether it's true, not whether it's
sure
or stupid, but just does it follow? You'll see throwing in a comment about Rosie O'Donnell. And in his first two debates, his rate of coherence, by my measure, is about 64%. That shoots up to 85%. Most of us are more coherent than that anyway, but that's still a marked improvement. And what's more compelling about these two together, that's simultaneously happening while his gestures are getting less hyperactive. Now, someone with ADHD, if they're really wanting to appear more coherent, may focus on their speech. But if you're focusing on your speech, your body is going to be more out of control. So to have his body in more control and his speech more in control is highly suggestive, but still circumstantial evidence that he was taking stimulants. But the real kicker is if you look at what happens to his pupils. And both Hillary, and I compared his to Hillary because they're under the similar lighting conditions. The first two debates, their pupils are about 10 to 15% covering their iris, pretty small, they're under bright lights. In the third debate, Hillary's are the same. They're still about 10 to 15% covering her surface. His blow up to 40 to 50%. So a huge dilation of his pupils. And that is one of the things that stimulant medications do, is they dilate your pupils. There's a few other classes of medicines and a few other things. There can be lighting issues, but again, clearly it's not a lighting issue. So to have these three things simultaneously happening, pupil dilation, reduced hyperactivity, is compelling. It's physiologic evidence. So as one emergency room physician I was talking to about this said, if you saw Donald Trump put Adderall in his mouth, that's not as good evidence as we have right here that he was taking stimulants, because of, people can cheek medicine, they cannot swallow it. But here we have direct, compelling evidence that his body is responding to something. And the classic spin is that, and stories of Trump using stimulants have trailed him not just on the set of That Apprentice, where there's at least two actors who have testified publicly they saw him snorting Adderall. But the decade before that, he was taking phentermine. He attributed it's a stimulant. It was used for diet control, but it's also something that addresses and treats ADHD. So there's been a long history of his association with these substances. And most of the criticism or talk about it is that these substances, these stimulants, explain why he's so hyperactive. They explain why he's so jittery and off track and tangential. I think it's just the opposite. I think he compellingly meets the full criteria for ADHD. And with someone with ADHD, these are actually helpful medications. So again, they made him look more presidential. And this is kind of off, maybe not appropriate for a doctor to be phrasing it this way, but I said in one of my writing that rather than riffing on his sniffing, we should actually be supporting his snorting. When he was president, you should have wanted Donald Trump to be using stimulants every day, because he's more aware of what's going on around him. He's more able to prepare and plan. He's more able to be coherent. He's less impulsive. He's better emotionally regulated. He
So
looks
let's talk
more.
about a couple of these different things. So when it comes to Joe Biden, the generic path of the conversation seems to be Biden's using something to get through a 100-minute speech. In general, people like me will say, well, what is he on? And either whoever makes the claim has no idea, or they will suggest something that would not really work in the way that they claim it would work to cover the dementia they claim Biden is experiencing, or whatever the case may be. Here you're making a very different case, which is we actually have an idea of what it is that Trump would take, and it would work in exactly the way you're describing. As you said, it doesn't make his statements any more true. It doesn't make his attitude towards his opponents any less authoritarian. It simply makes him be able to regulate the physical movements and to focus in on at least speaking in sequential sentences, if nothing else.
Exactly.
What do you believe are the signs that Trump has ADHD?
So ADHD, our official definition is 18 symptoms, 9 of them inattentive symptoms, 9 of them hyperactive and impulsive symptoms. It's our only major mental health condition where the definition is completely dependent on observable behaviors. So it doesn't matter what he's feeling. It doesn't matter what's motivating him. Is he blurting things out inappropriately? Is he walking around when he's supposed to be sitting down? Is he fidgeting uncontrollably? Is he making careless mistakes because he's not paying attention? Is he failing to start or initiate projects because they are too complex or challenging? So unequivocally, objectively, and these are, you have to do these in more than one situation. You can't just, and you have to be doing them pervasively and to an extent greater than your peers. But any objective looking at his behavior, and from the video data, we have way more data on, looking at Trump over time, looking at him in different situations, corroborated by huge numbers of individuals. The amount of information we have from the video available that's publicly is way more extensive than you would ever get in a one-to-one discussion evaluation in your office. And so So, so he displays inattentiveness, he displays impulsivity, he displays hyperactivity to extent that's in excess for his peer group, people his age, people his generation, and it's not the least bit subtle. What's sort of frustrating was that for the first, and even to this date, people say he's hyperactive, he's tangential, he's off track, he's doing this, he's a narcissist, and I'm thinking none of those actually have anything to do with narcissism. They are all classic ADHD symptoms.
Let me ask you then a broader question. If we consider the ADHD as you describe it, increasingly there's a story that has been breaking into corporate media that something else is going on with Trump. And this refers to the phonemic paraphasias, the inability to recognize when he said something that he knows to be factually wrong, like he gets the president wrong or the candidates in the 2012 election wrong or whatever the case may be, or he says that Nikki Haley was in charge of Capitol security. He refers to Joe Biden as Joe Bride and doesn't seem to recognize it and go back. All those sorts of things, which Dr. John Gartner, who we interviewed some time ago, outlined. That's all separate from the ADHD, right?
They're separate processes. And again, as you're highlighting, there can be a lot of overlap between symptomatology. We sort of classify dementia as a memory issue and ADHD as an attention issue. But if you're not paying attention, then you're not encoding information properly. So there's much more overlap in actual symptomatology and presentation. And yeah, so I mean, the difficult thing is for dementia, we need formal testing or measures of deterioration in functioning. And for identifying Alzheimer's, still we need, classically, we need brain samples, a biopsy, which no one's going to do. We're getting closer to having blood tests and PET scans, which may be definitive in helping form a diagnosis, but we're not quite there yet. So I think, yes, there seems to be another process that seems to be enhancing, exacerbating, worsening his ADHD symptomatology. Because normally, by the time you're an adult, the degree of ADHD you have is fairly stable. You may have a bad day if you sleep poorly. There can be factors that affect it on a day-to-day basis, but there is clearly, most people are seeing a significant trend in his performance.
Dr. Harry Siegel, a psychologist who I interviewed some time ago, said that he notices that Trump's evening events seem particularly more problematic with regard to a lot of these symptoms as his daytime events. With Adderall use aside, as far as the ADHD part, is there typically a time of day difference there, or would anything that we're noticing as far as time of day be a separate process than the ADHD?
Well, with ADHD, there is a lot of individual variation, but there's a strong genetic bias towards what we call late chronotypes, which means most ADHD people are lousy in the morning and stay up all hours of the night. And we saw this, he's tweeting at 2 a.m. He's tweeting.
Right. Not getting down to the Oval Office until 10 or 11,
That's
but
right. And he's in
tweeting at
his
3 a.m.
pajamas watching Fox News for several hours in the morning. So
Right.
it's the more classic pattern. But again, there's a lot of individual variation. So I would say poor performance in the evening is more fitting with the dementia picture, where what's called sundowning is classic, that people get more confused, disoriented towards the end of the day.
Do you think as we prepare for this debate Thursday and the idea of drug testing the candidates has been floated mostly by Republicans, Trump wants it. His former doctor, Ronnie Jackson, who Trump referred to as Ronnie Johnson recently, said that he wants it, et cetera. Do you think that, would there be any value to that given what you've observed from both of these individuals? Is it just like, it's not typically done, but sure, why not? Or does it seem kind of like a waste of time?
To me, it seems gratuitous if we're not demanding a more thorough sort of physical mental examination, which I think we should be doing. Yes, it's intrusive, but we're giving, the irony, these people, the president is a commander-in-chief of our military. There are very strict physical, mental testing that a raw recruit, a private, has to undergo to be in our military. but to lead the whole thing, absolutely nothing. And interestingly, ADHD itself is not a disqualification from the US military, but actually taking medication to control your ADHD is an automatic
Mm.
discharge, which almost has it backwards. Maybe it's saying we can't or we shouldn't be treating these people who have it. So again, I would frame treatment as probably a positive thing that we shouldn't be stigmatizing someone for, but then we should be open and transparent about what they're using it for and when they're using it. And again, in Trump's case, I think he and the country would have been better off taking it every day, which he clearly wasn't.
So in other words, there's no real problem with drug tests, but if the drug tests turn something up, the understanding of what, if any, condition is being treated would really be the critical part.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Fascinating. We've been speaking with Dr. John Kruse. We will be watching on Thursday, and I really do appreciate your time and insights today.
Thanks. I'm glad to be able to talk with your audience.